The morning light drifted slowly across the frozen spruce forest, turning the tips of the trees a faint gold as if the sun were carefully brushing color onto a world still trapped in blue shadow. The air hung completely still, thick with the silence that came only to the far north in winter. The snow lay untouched except for the faint trail of a single man's footsteps, already filling with powder as the cold wind crept in from the distant mountains. A thin ribbon of smoke rose from a small cabin tucked against a line of black spruce, its logs darkened by weather and time. In that small cabin lived a man who had come farther than most ever dreamed and stayed longer than almost anyone could endure. His name was Elias Crow, and he had become known, quietly and without seeking it, as one of Alaska's last real homesteaders. Elias had arrived in the early 1960s, during the final years of the Homestead Act. He had traveled north when the world he knew began to fray, trading roads and crowds for the open silence of the frontier. He carried little more than a canvas tent, an axe, a rifle, and a lifetime of hard-learned lessons from his father, a stern but patient trapper from the Yukon. His father had taught him that the land did not bow to anyone, and that survival depended on skill, respect, and the willingness to listen to the world around you. These lessons guided him as he stepped off the last bush plane near the Kandik River and watched the small aircraft lift into the sky, leaving him alone with his claim, 80 acres of spruce forest, frozen riverbank, and rolling hills that stretched toward the Canadian border. At first, Elias lived beneath the canvas tent he pitched beneath two leaning birch trees. The cold sank in early that year, chilling the ground before he had time to gather enough wood. Each morning he woke to frost creeping along the tent walls and ice frozen inside the water bucket he kept near his bedroll. Still, the quiet steadiness of the land comforted him. He rose before the sun, split spruce logs with careful rhythm, and listened to the steady thump of the axe echo through the valley. The sound rolled away into the trees, fading until nothing but silence remained. For Elias, that silence was not empty. It was a sign that the land was listening, measuring him, deciding whether he belonged. By mid-September, he had sketched out the frame of a small cabin using young spruce poles cut from a stand near the river. He peeled their bark with a hand-drawn knife, smoothing each length until it felt clean and sturdy beneath his gloves. The scent of fresh spruce filled the air, sharp and sweet. He worked quickly as the days shortened and the temperatures dropped. Each blow of the axe sent a ringing chill into his arms, and each notch he carved into the logs marked one step closer to shelter. At night the river cracked loudly as the first skim of ice spread across it, groaning like a heavy door pushed open by invisible hands. Building a cabin in the northern wilderness required patience and endurance. Elias dragged each log into place using a crude wooden sled he built from scrap boards. He packed moss into the gaps between the logs, pressing it in with his bare fingers until they stung from the cold. When the wind grew too strong, he worked by the glow of a lantern, the light bouncing off the frost and turning the unfinished cabin into a flickering shape in the darkness. He often spoke aloud into the cold, reminding himself of each step, the way his father had once done. In this remote place, his own voice became a companion, rising and falling in the dim hours before dawn. When the cabin was finally roofed and sealed, Elias carried his few belongings inside and lit his first fire in the small stone hearth he had built. The flames hissed as they caught, filling the space with warmth and the faint scent of burning birch. Outside, snow had begun to fall steadily, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. The spruce trees stood rigid beneath the weight of it, their branches bending but refusing to break. Elias listened to the wind push against the walls of the cabin and knew winter had arrived for good. In those first weeks, the isolation settled around him like another layer of frost. Days passed without any sound except for the creak of the trees, the pop of sap in the fire, and the distant crack of the river shifting beneath its icy cover. There were no roads here, no neighbors, no lights shining from distant windows. Only the vastness of a land that demanded everything a person had to give. Still, Elias moved through each day with quiet purpose, gathering wood, checking the traps he set along the tree line, and keeping watch on the sky for signs of changing weather. The deeper the winter grew, the more he understood why so few homesteaders stayed. Alaska was a land of extremes, beautiful yet unforgiving. The temperature fell to nearly 50 below on some nights, turning the cabin walls brittle and sending frost creeping across the inside of the windows. Elias learned to sleep lightly, waking at the faintest crack of ice or the heavy thump of snow falling from the roof. His breath lingered in the air long after he exhaled, shimmering in the faint light of the lantern. Even the fire seemed to burn slower in the cold, as if the air itself resisted warmth. Despite the challenges, Elias found comfort in the rhythm of the days. He gathered firewood from fallen spruce, the smell of their sap clinging to his gloves. He boiled snow for drinking water, watching the steam curl upward in thin white ribbons. He walked along the river's frozen edge, listening to the deep echoes traveling beneath the ice like the heartbeat of the land. In these moments, he felt connected to the generations who had lived in the north before him, indigenous hunters, early trappers, and the few remaining homesteaders scattered across Alaska's vast interior. But winter was tightening its grip faster than anyone expected. Storms rolled down from the mountains with little warning, burying the cabin beneath heavy snow that rose nearly to the windows. The winds howled through the spruce stands, bending their trunks and scattering loose branches across the frozen ground. Elias worked tirelessly to keep paths clear, chopping through drifts taller than his shoulders. Even with all his skill, he could sense the growing danger. Food grew harder to find. The cold seeped deeper into the cabin each night. The land was testing him, waiting to see if he would yield or stand firm. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky and the temperature dropped sharply, Elias stepped outside to gather more wood. The wind whipped across the clearing, lifting snow in swirling clouds that stung his face like sand. In the distance he heard a sound he hadn't heard in weeks, the hollow crack of ice splitting far down the river. It echoed through the valley like a warning. He paused, listening, feeling the weight of the cold pressing against him. Winter was not just coming. It had arrived with a ferocity unseen in years. Elias knew the true test was only beginning. As he carried the wood back inside, the firelight flickered across the cabin walls, casting long shadows that swayed like restless spirits. He warmed his hands over the flames and stared at the frost building along the windowsill. No matter how strong the cabin was, no matter how skilled he had become, the harshest season Alaska offered was still ahead. And deep inside, he wondered whether the old ways he had learned would be enough to face what was coming. The storm outside started to grow again, tapping at the cabin roof with icy fingers. Elias listened quietly, preparing for the long months ahead, knowing that each decision he made could shape the rest of his time on the homestead. The land was not finished with him, not yet, and the next challenge waited just beyond the next sunrise.